Hello folks and welcome to a brand new episode of Political Frenemies. We are the podcast where a Liberal Democrat and a Conservative and our guest as well debate the week's news robustly and remain friends at the end. How's about that? I'm Mathew Hulbert. I'm a Lib Dem activist and former Lib Dem councillor. We'll come to our guest, who you know well, in just a second. But first of all, I'd best introduce him. It's Dr. Chris Newton, academic, historian, all-around good guy. Did I really just say that? I did. And he advised the Tories the last time they were in opposition. Dr. Chris, how are you?
Hello, Matthew. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I'm blooming freezing. I know there are some people who don't like me mentioning the weather every week, but this week it really is freezing. Yeah, I just don't like it. I just want it to get back to spring and summer again. But there you are.
Yeah, I hate the cold weather, and I have to say, doing this tonight has given me a good excuse to not have to be at our local light switch on here in Hinckley, which will be a fantastic event at the Borough Council. The Lib Dem run Borough Council.
Yeah, you miss it. That's religious.
Absolutely sacrilegious, but yeah, the local Lib Dem run Borough Council here puts on a fantastic event. But I'm not sorry in a way not to be there because it's very, very cold here today. And of course, with us, he stepped into the breach, bless him, again this week. So God love him. It's Conservative councillor, author, activist, podcaster now. He basically does everything. It's Matthew Goodwin-Freeman.
Yes.
Hello, Matthew.
Hi, how are you? I feel like it's a bit strange coming on all the time. I need to have like a curtain and we just reveal, oh, it's Matthew again.
Yeah, absolutely, and yeah, we really appreciate you. I won't say who, but we were hoping to have someone from Labour because we try and be fair, and they are the government, and that's fair enough. And said person is no longer replying to his tweets. So what can you do?
Well, you're definitely not going to get any left wing from me, I'm afraid. So sorry about that.
Well, we had Dr. George making his debut last week, and he was quite left wing, so that's good. He did a good job. So Matthew, how have you been?
Yeah, fine. Really busy. I completely agree with Dr. Chris. It's absolutely freezing right now. But I have got a treat for you, Matthew. I have a different Union Jack shirt this week. It's a different one. It's got a lovely collar. So, still got the beautiful Union Jack. So, I thought I'd do something special for you.
We wouldn't expect anything else at all from you, Matthew. It's what you've become known for. And can I just say, folks, if I'm sounding a little bit different, it's because I'm actually a wee bit poorly. I know man flu. I know, what can I tell you? I'm feeling a little bit like I'm at death's door, but hopefully not. But we're powering through because that's what we do on this podcast. So what are we talking about today? We're going to be talking, of course, about Shabana Mahmood and her announcements this week, which have gone down very well in some quarters and very not well in others. We'll be talking about that. We'll be getting into the COVID inquiry report that has been very damning. Some people calling for Boris Johnson to lose some of the stuff that he gets as a former Prime Minister as a result of that. I'll be relying very heavily on Dr. Chris when we talk about the Defence Select Committee report this week. And then I think we also do want to mention the sentencing today of Nathan Gill, the former Brexit Party MEP and Reform UK leader in Wales. So we'll be talking about that as well. So let's do it. So we're going to start off with the big announcement this week, the story that's been making all the political headlines, and that is some movement from this government, quite a lot of movement from this government, on immigration and asylum. The new Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has clearly, in her own way, I have my own views on it, which we'll get to, but has clearly in her own way decided to really try and get a grip on this issue. Of course, it's a big issue for many voters, especially for many reform voting voters. And so what has she said? So the Home Secretary has unveiled what's been described as the biggest changes to tackle immigration in modern times, modelled on the approach undertaken by the centre-left government in Denmark. It makes refugee status temporary, it narrows the appeal process and threatens visa bans on nations that block reforms. Matthew, let's start with you. You welcome this, I assume?
Yay! Fantastic! Fantastic! Shabana Mahmood, the latest Reform MP. Well, not yet, but we all know it's coming. I mean, my God, what an announcement that was. When you've got the day that Shabana Mahmood's saying stuff that I agree with, something's gone wrong in politics. I mean, fantastic. We've got this Labour government finally waking up to the fact that immigration is the #1 issue in this country. We are fed up of British people being put at the back of the queue. It's time to tell those lovely doctors and nurses coming over on the little small boats, sorry, you're going to have to wait. The only problem is with all of that, I do not believe Labour are going to push this through. I think they're going to have a backbench rebellion. I think their MPs are going to block it. And I think they're going to row back on all of these promises. So on one hand, I'm over the moon, fantastic, someone saying what we need to say. On the other hand, it's not going to happen, and I'm back down to waiting for a new government.
Dr. Chris, I presume you pretty much agree with that, but let me put to you a further question, so we don't just hear the same thing from you. From a Labour perspective, if I can get you to think of in a Labour perspective, I know that'll be difficult for you, Dr. Chris, but if you can, to have a speech that was praised, and I made this point on LBC earlier this week, to have a speech that's praised by Nigel Farage, to have a speech that was praised by Tommy Robinson, to have a speech that was praised by Kemi Badenoch, there'll be a lot of unsettled feeling on the Labour benches.
Yeah, and there's already been, quite a lot of outcry from the Labour benches, and we saw that during the statements that Mahmood gave during the course of the week, and also a lot of disquiet among sort of Green and other sort of left-wing MPs as well, which Mahmood gave, blistering responses to. I mean, absolutely. I mean, her. To be fair on her, her performances were really good, and she was actually very impressive. But you're right. You're both right in the sense that there's going to be a lot of trouble inside the Labour Party. We'll have to see. I don't know whether she'll get it through. And also it's not just Labour MPs; it's also the lefty lawyers as well, because I'm sure the lefty lawyers will use the ECHR and the Human Rights Act and various other bits of legislation to try and block it, which is actually extraordinary when you think about it. Labour's kind of witnessed all of the shenanigans that went on under the Tories, and they seem to be just repeating the same old thing, which makes you think, how sincere is this? And it's interesting. It's interesting how Mahmood is today compared with how she was 10 years ago when she was on islands, campaigning for the migrations. I think it was a Greek island or something. So she's either gone on a major political journey, or she sees political opportunity in this. But it's interesting nonetheless how much of a changed politician that she is now.
Yeah, absolutely, and she clearly is. So just to give you my view, and look, the first thing I want to say is I accept that I am far more liberal on these matters than the vast majority of the British public. I'm not going to try and pretend that I'm not, but I'm also not going to try and pretend that my view isn't my view, because that goes totally against what this podcast is about. So again, as I said to our good friend Ian Dale on LBC earlier this week, look, I accept that we have to have a system. I accept that. We're a country. We have borders. We need a system. But I just worry too much that we kind of treat people as if they're not human beings, as if they're not people who are seeking, whether we agree with them or not. These are people who are seeking a better life, and what is wrong with that? Is a broader question that I'd ask that you may want to respond to. And my view is that I guess we need a system that is both firm and fair, and I worry that we do the firm bit but not the fair bit. I mean, I watched a lot of the coverage, a lot of the debate of the statement of Shabana Mahmood, and she clearly had her Weetabix. I mean, she was on fine form, and she gave my party's spokesperson, who I know well actually, Max Wilkinson, Cheltenham MP, our Home Affairs spokesperson, a bit of a pasting from her perspective. And it was certainly clipped up, and lots of people were poking fun at Max as a result. But I think actually the points that he made were perfectly valid and were ones that I absolutely would expect a Lib Dem spokesperson to be making. So Matthew, so she's clearly going for the reform voter, right?
Yeah.
But don't you think that there is that's okay, that's fair enough from her perspective, but don't you think that there's always a danger then that Labour is going to lose a lot of its more liberal set of voters to the likes of the Lib Dems and the Greens?
Yeah, spot on. Labour are caught on either side now of the political spectrum. Do they jump to the right and try and get some of those reform voters back, or do they just jump to the left and try and get some of those Green Lib Dem voters back? They are in a difficult place. I do not believe that Labour are going to be able to get through these reforms. I think it's all just lip service, and I don't think the backbenchers are going to allow them. Because remember, a lot of these Labour backbenchers, A, were not expecting to win, B, have worked their way up through the Labour Party mechanisms, all the different ways, all the different roles. They are the grassroots momentum hard lefties. So the party is not going to suddenly go, oh yeah, we'll be really tough on immigration, basically say what Reform are saying. It's not going to happen, and I can see them rebelling against this and getting, it being watered down over the coming weeks. I just want to pick up on what you said, though, Matthew, about people coming over here to, experience a better life. That's not a problem. I get that, and that's no problem. But we have to also look at the lives that British people are having, and the fact that we are now paying £7 million a day to look after illegal immigrants coming into this country. Their first act of coming to this country is actually breaking the law because they're crossing the border illegally. Why can't they claim asylum in the first safe country that they've come from, which all of them have come from France, and I'd argue France is a pretty safe country. A lot of Brits go on holiday there every year. So I think it's a bit in give and take at the end of the day, and given the freezing weather, I have walked past so many people who are homeless, who are sleeping rough on the streets in this freezing cold weather. We've seen what's happened with veterans in Britain, and everything that they're going through. This ring up to get a house and you'll end up being sent a tent scheme. I personally, and I think the British public would agree, I'd rather we put them into the hotels rather than the illegal immigrants.
But Matthew, let me push back on you just a wee bit because and again, this was a point I made earlier in the week. I mean, I think that those things, and also young people not being in education, work, or training, I think that's as a direct result of domestic government policy. That isn't about the person who doesn't look quite like you who lives down the street. I think those are two separate issues.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see how that answers my question of stopping illegal immigrants crossing the border illegally and claiming asylum in the first safe country, but fine.
Yeah, I mean, and we've had footage sort of this week of these illegal migrants in the hotels having
having a party.
meals, having parties, having fights, and surely you can see from the perspective of a hard up, struggling British taxpayer who's contemplating whether to turn the heating on or not. Seeing scenes like that, it is a bit of a kick in the balls to them, isn't it? Really.
I personally think it conflates two things. I think we can have domestic governments that make different domestic choices that decide to spend more on public services and to tax the richest a bit more to be able to do so and ensure that we have good public services for everyone and as much as is possible in a market economy, which I support, by the way, because I know I'm to the left of the Lib Dems, but I'm actually not really that left. I do believe in a market economy, to help people as much as is possible to get into good paying jobs. I think we can do all of that and also be a welcoming country to those who are fleeing persecution. So, I mean, let me ask Matthew, because I think this is an important question.
Be a welcoming country to those who
just hang on one second. I want to ask you. So, given what you said about France and all of that, it's what we always hear when we discuss these things. Do you agree with Shabana Mahmood when she has suggested, and let's wait to see the detail, I agree, But do you agree with Shabana Mahmood when she has also said that she will be introducing more safe and legal routes? Do you welcome that or not?
Yeah, I think safe and legal routes are what we've needed for a long time. Whether that's an illegal immigrant, an asylum seeker, turning up in Calais and then being processed there, I'd actually be all in favour of that. But the point is, we are seeing people coming from countries who they don't even tell us what country they've come from, chucking their documents into the sea, ripping them up, throwing them away, so we have no idea who these people are apart from their word. And then we see the scandals of 30-year-old men being in classrooms with teenagers. We see the scandal of convicted terrorists.
Do you think that happens often?
It doesn't matter if it happens often. Once is way too many. We have convicted terrorists who have come from other countries, claimed asylum, been granted asylum, and then we only find out, oh, by the way, they were a convicted terrorist in their home country. That's unacceptable. We have no idea who these people are, and we're just willing to let them in. And not even let them in, give them hotel rooms, give them food, breakfast, place to stay, and let them walk the streets. I argued many, many years ago, we should use the hotels, if we have to use the hotels, like a detention centre. You lock the doors, you bring the food to their room, they eat the food, the tray comes back. Letting them out onto the streets with no tags, no idea where they're going or if they're going to come back is just asking for trouble, and we have seen that at Epping, we have seen that around the country, we have seen the consequences of it. I can't wait for a government to be tougher on immigration, but I don't think Labour are going to. At the moment, I think it is just lip service because they know they are hemorrhaging votes to the right wing.
Chris?
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is that there is ultimately a limit. No matter how much tax you raise, no matter how much you spend, there is ultimately going to be a limit, and a limit to how many we can accommodate, both legal migration and obviously we should deport those who come here illegally, but because even if you do spend a lot of money on infrastructure, it takes years, it takes time for the infrastructure to be developed, and then there's also issues of how the local communities think about the new sprawling infrastructure being developed. So it has to be sensible. Any immigration policy has to be sensible, and fair, both to the immigrants, but also to the people, to the people who already live here. Otherwise, you're seeing a situation that we're seeing at the moment, where public support for immigration and public tolerance for immigration is going to go down.
So Chris, let me just put one question to you, and then we may need to move on to our next topic today. And actually, it was an interesting one that was raised by Alex Sobel, who was the Labour MP guy on the cross-question panel that I was on earlier in the week, when he said that, so for example, if you're a gay person in Uganda, you might seriously, given a lot of their homophobic laws, you might personally be under great jeopardy there, and yet that might be considered a safe country, but it's not safe for you as a gay person. So I ask you, should that gay person in Uganda facing, potential very serious harm, even though it's a safe country, should they be allowed to come to the UK or not?
Well, you have to devise the policy. Like I say, there's a limit, there's a finite limit, and you have to devise a policy on the basis of, which you consider to be sort of more severe. So for example, you might say, well, the most severe are the people who are generally coming from conflict, from war zones, from conflict zones, or from authoritarian regimes where there's the death penalty, and so forth. So you have to judge it on that basis. Now, I can't say off the top of my head whether that example there, there's going to be a sufficient number for us to accommodate that person. But you should always assess these things on who are the most in need, and that's the starting point.
So it shouldn't be based on each individual case.
It should be that, but ultimately, as I said, we cannot take everybody.
Yeah, and also the flip side is why Britain? Why Britain for the guy from Uganda who will have travelled through probably dozens of countries to get to Britain?
Well,
Why
why
have we
not
got to
Britain?
take the guy from Britain?
Why not Britain?
If the guy's got no connection to Britain whatsoever, has never been to Britain in his life, has no family or anything in Britain, then there's no reason for Britain to take this guy. Like it's a hypothetical. The point is, people have connections around the world. If you do not have a serious enough connection to up your life in one country and move permanently to another country, then I'm sorry, but I frankly don't see the reasons for you to travel the thousands and thousands of miles and then expect Britain to bow down.
All right, let me ask you this. If you are the child of an immigrant, someone who has come here, if you were a child of that immigrant and born here, are you British?
Is that a question to me?
Well, whoever.
Okay. In my opinion, I think that there needs to be an actual level where we start handing out British citizenship. And I think that's across the board. I think that's not just for people coming here. I think that's for people born here as well who are not first, second, third generation immigrants. I think there's got to be a higher level for handing out that, well, I was going to say purple passport, but it's now a blue passport. I think it's got to be a higher level of a thing. So in my opinion, personally, I don't think, in the hypothetical situation, you could step off a flight, pregnant and lied that you were pregnant, give birth a couple of days later, and then suddenly, that person's got the British citizenship, so now we've all got to stay here. Which we know happens. Pregnancy tourism happens.
If you're someone who has, I mean, you've given a particular case there, and okay, that might be questionable, but if you're someone who is now in your 20s, 30s, 40s, who was born here, who has only ever known life here, who is British, under these...
Fine by me. But I think there's got to be a threshold. I think 20 years is probably a good level, as you've said. And I think that's actually what Labour are going to bring in, this 20-year rule.
Chris, anything more?
No, I mean, again, they can also apply for British citizenship as well. I don't have anything more to add to that.
Do you think this will work for Labour?
No.
No. Okay, there we are, folks. I don't think any of us from our different perspectives think this will work for Labour. Okay, then. Big news today on the Friday that we're recording this, and that is that the report into the government's handling of the COVID pandemic has said lockdown could have been avoided if other steps such as social distancing and social isolation had been introduced earlier. But also said that introducing lockdown a week earlier could have saved thousands of lives. The report also describes a toxic and chaotic culture at the heart of government during the pandemic. So let me put it to you two gentlemen, both who either are or have been very active participants in the Conservative Party. Let me put it to you that government led by Boris Johnson was a disgrace and that he should never return to public life in any meaningful way. Matthew?
Do you want to go first, Chris, whilst I stew and prepare?
Well, I think there was a lot, in that period which I disagreed with. I think the report itself. They've clearly, if you watch the sessions, they clearly came up with a conclusion before conducting the inquiry and just shoehorn the evidence in line with that predetermined conclusion.
Really?
Yeah, that was what that was how the line of questioning came across to me, and that's how the findings have come to me. And I think what you can criticise the government for is a kind of and indeed this inquiry is a lack of interrogation of sort of the prevailing sort of views that has come out. The sort of lack of looking into alternatives, such as what was happening in Sweden and certain states of the United States. There doesn't seem to be much open-mindedness among the inquiry in terms of that. Also you have to look into the officials as well. I mean the politicians as well, and I'm not saying that they're not to blame as well, but the advice and the policies changed and flip-flopped during the course of the pandemic as well, whether it's on herd immunity or whether it's on masks. They were absolutely adamant that masks didn't work at one stage, and then all of a sudden they changed their view on that, and they're saying if you do not wear masks, then you're spreading the disease. So there is all kinds of aspects to this that should be interrogated further. I'm not quite sure whether the inquiry did so far anyway, because this is only like the second report, isn't it? I don't think the inquiry has done a good job, but certainly this is not the Conservative. This was not the Conservative government's finest moment, with the exception of the vaccine rollout, which there are important lessons to learn from that. But there are also there have been people who have quite criticised that as well.
Matthew, can I ask you? I mean, do you think there might be a potential actual legal redress for COVID survivors and families?
No. No.
Okay.
This was a once-in-a-generation pandemic, and the inquiry and the reports coming from it are full of could have, would have, should but if. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. Let me just take us back to the pandemic, December 2019, January, February, March 2020. This was a once-in-a-generation pandemic. No one knew what was actually going to happen. I remember vividly university saying, we're breaking up for Christmas, everyone go back home. We had the starting rumours of the pandemic in China, and I said to my friends, this will be just like Ebola. There'll be a handful of cases, they'll end up in a hospital, and that'll be it. They'll come out a couple of weeks later. Let's just give some balance to this. China lied. China lied, hid up and fabricated everything that was going on. If they had told us the truth, the world would have not gone through what it went through. The science was changing. As Dr. Chris has said, the science changed practically day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute in some cases. So how do you expect politicians to make decisions based on science that's changing, which was changing because they were finding out more and more truths from China? I've said it was a once-in-a-generation pandemic. There was no plan. There's no blueprint for this. As much as people say, we should be prepared, pandemics like this don't come around all that often. The last serious pandemic was the Spanish flu back after the First World War. So if people want to say the government needs to be prepared for that level of a pandemic every single year, 24/7, then I politely ask them to find where that money comes from, and therefore they'd be paying a lot more taxes. Look at our neighbours, Europe, the US. We're only starting to lock down at the time as we were. Yes, 1 week, 2 weeks could have made all the difference, but it was a gradual thing as people suddenly realised we have to basically put life and politics on hold and do stuff none of us have ever done before. I don't think this inquiry, which is already the most expensive inquiry in British history and is only going to get more expensive, is worth the value for money that we British taxpayers expect. People can lecture as much as they want. They can say things could have, should have, would have been different. But I tell you, and I put it to you now, no one would have done anything different, because it wasn't a Conservative policy to wait for lockdown. It wasn't a Labour policy to wait for... It was a science policy. The politicians put their political parties aside for a second and did whatever the science wanted. And I think that is the lessons we need to learn as a country, where the decision-making needs to come to in these times of crisis.
They might have put their parties aside, but sadly in Boris Johnson's case, he didn't put his whole personality aside. I mean, the fact is, he was a chaotic prime minister at the moment when we needed someone who wasn't chaotic. I mean, you're not pretending.
You forget he nearly died.
Would have been any better.
At the height of it, he nearly died. So there was a vacuum.
You're not pretending.
Firstly, Boris Johnson nearly died from the pandemic. So I don't think there's anyone who knew better what the devastating consequences of the pandemic could have been.
Well, then he should have done better if he knew better. I mean, that was
okay. So he should have done better. If you remember, if you remember, Dominic Cummings, after the pandemic, the man who during the pandemic everyone said was an absolute liar, scandal sleaze, no one can trust a word he says, but as soon as he leaves the government as an advisor, he is now the gospel and everyone should believe everything he says. Dominic Cummings said, and I quote, so I apologise, that he walked into Downing Street and someone said, we are going to effing kill 1.5 to 2.5 million people with this pandemic. We had 125,000 deaths. That is 10%. Now, I'm not congratulating anybody. I'm not saying well done. One death was too many. But in any other circumstance where you save 90% of people's lives, you would be congratulated for that. So I am sorry, but Boris Johnson, for whatever things you want to say, whatever stuff came out afterwards, all the Partygate and everything, which again, I will caveat, Boris Johnson didn't even have a slice of the bumming birthday cake that was bought for him. It was civil servants who were getting drunk every single Friday in number 10, throwing up everywhere. They should have been sacked and fired. Boris Johnson did what any Prime Minister in that time would have done, which is let science make the decisions. And so we cannot blame the politicians for the decision-making of the scientists at the time, Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance, who both ended up with gongs and future promotions and roles. They need looking at as well as the politics.
Can I also just quickly add?
Sorry, just one second. And so therefore, if you accept that argument, which I don't, but if you accept that argument, then that goes the same for Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland and whoever else. We're not to blame the politicians. We're to blame the scientists.
The point is, there is so much revisionism going on. Everyone's trying to rewrite what happened. I put it to you that no one can look in the mirror and say, I 100% all the time followed every single rule and every single guidance and every single bit of medical evidence. No one can, because it changed nearly every single week and month. This was a once-in-a-generation pandemic. Mistakes are made. We are all human. But what I hate is this trying to rewrite that everyone else in the world was perfect. Everyone else in the world did so much better at this pandemic than we did. And it's all down to those dreadful, dreadful politicians in the Westminster bubble who didn't know what the heck was going on. Because at the end of the day, the politicians aren't the scientists. Politicians aren't there to be prepared for once-in-a-generation pandemics. They are prepared to make decisions, and they can only go off of the advice they were given.
Two things I would add to that. Firstly, you talked about Sturgeon and so forth. I think the whole setup with regards to national government and devolution was absolutely chaotic, and that does need to be looked at, because it was ridiculous that in some parts of the country there was certain advice, other parts of the country there was other advice, and everybody was confused. So I think that does need to be looked at. But also in terms of kind of responsibility and so forth, why was it that the one thing that most people agreed actually worked from a delivery point of view, the vaccine rollout, why was that the one thing that worked was the thing that was actually taken out of the Department of Health, ran in a very different way, and ultimately that worked. That tells you there is something about the machinery of government which, as Dominic Cummings has said during the course of this inquiry, all of those lessons, all of that new structure that was created was completely done away with.
Matthew, let me just ask you briefly and very finally on this particular issue. Has this done for any hopes that Boris Johnson had of a return?
I think Boris would never be able to return purely because of the beliefs and attitudes that people have in the country, that everything was down to him and his fault. I personally, it makes no difference to me, frankly, if Boris comes back or not. I don't think he'd ever be able to. Whether or not people think he might, I don't think will be able to, because there is that section of society who will still believe that Boris was the one standing on the tables, dancing and getting drunk. Boris, the one who made all the science, was the scientist. He knew what was going to happen. He wanted those people. I just think there has been so much rewriting of what happened, and it's all painted as Boris, Boris, Boris. I don't think he'd ever be able to come back. I personally think the whole period was a stain on politics, but are staying around the world. And I'm so furious and fed up of the rewriting and people changing what they believed happened at the time for A, the facts, and B, looking in the mirror. No one can look in the mirror and say they followed every rule every time at every point and were squeaky clean. No one can. Not even the nurses who were doing their blooming TikToks.
I think, just very quickly, I think for people on the right, I think the Boris wave, the immigration wave, is much more of a decisive factor than COVID in terms of them not accepting Boris as leader ever again.
And Matthew, my party leader has said that Kemi Badenoch, as the current Tory leader, should apologise on behalf of the Conservatives for all of this. Should she?
Well, I'm still waiting for Ed Davey to apologise for the post office scandal. So, once he apologises, maybe we'll apologise.
That's a mic drop moment. So, okay, let's move on to talk about the defence of the realm. And of course, we have an expert here when it comes to these matters, and we'll come to Dr. Newton in just a second. So, yeah, in a new report, the Commons Defence Select Committee has said that the UK lacks a plan to defend itself from a military attack, saying that the country is nowhere near where it needs to be to defend itself and its allies. So put some meat on those bones, Dr. Chris.
Yeah, the report outlined sort of various weaknesses with British capability, where we rely too much on the US. We're particularly weak in terms of integrated air and missile defence, protection against hybrid warfare, national resilience, and our defence industrial base. And there's also been an incident this week within our wider waters. The Yantar, this Russian spy ship, also has cable cutting equipment on it and flashing lasers at RAF aircraft, Sidon aircraft. So ultimately, this goes. I mean, they didn't really say anything new. The Defence Select Committee. It's stuff that I've been saying for 20 odd years. Stuff that I was trying to say to the leadership of the Conservative Party back in the late 2000s, but I think they just nodded politely and thought I was a bit of a madman. Or that might have been something else actually as well. But this is. But ultimately, this is very serious, especially given that Trump seems to be decoupling himself, especially with this new Ukraine peace plan from the Europeans. And this is very serious. And I would say in the budget next week, if I was Chancellor, if I was Prime Minister, we'd be in a much better place if that happened. But I would say very seriously that we need, this is a very serious moment, and this needs to be the defence budget. We need to seriously up the spending on defence. We need to bring forward the 3% targets to now, and we need another funding model for public spending, moving away from a social democratic model to a patriotic defence one. But of course that's not going to happen, despite everything that's going on in the world.
Matthew?
Well, I mean, I'd love to know what cabinet role I'll be taking in Chris's government. That would be interesting. I'll be chief Union Jack lover or something like that. We'll find
Culture
a way.
Secretary.
Yeah, there we go. Right, look, Russia is playing games here at the end of the day. They are testing us. They are testing to see what we're going to do. They're prodding the bear. The irony is we're not a proper bear. We're a Paddington bear. I really, really am worried.
Paddington.
I love Paddington too. Paddington, immigrant from Peru as well, funnily enough, which maybe we should learn something there, but hey-ho. The fact is, Russia is testing us. I loved Labour's "we see you and we know what you're doing." I mean, that's gonna shake fear into the Kremlin's heart. God, we really have got to wake up to the threat not only Russia play, but just around the world. And I was terrified to read the report that we, A, would not be able to defend ourselves, and B, would effectively capitulate within a matter of days. That's a dreadful state to be in. The first job of any government is to defend the realm, and it seems like we're not able to defend the realm. I completely agree with you, Chris. Next week's budget by Rachel from Accounts has not got to be the budget that's going for growth, because we saw how that worked last year. It has got to be a budget for defence. The problem is, it's not going to be a budget for defence. It's going to be a budget of more tax rises and broken promises. So on the safety point of view, I am very worried, and I hope we start talking tough. I don't know what reprimands we could give to Russia that wouldn't antagonise them, because frankly, if you put the shoe on the other foot, if we had entered Russian waters and were scoping out their underwater cables and things like that, Russia would say that's a sign of war, declaring what we can't play the game that Russia are playing. But I'd like us to be a bit tougher than just going, we see you and we know what you're doing. And pose. Just scare pose. Stare him out.
Just before we go, folks, talking of Russia, obviously, again, big news today on the Friday that we're recording, and that is that Nathan Gill, the former Brexit Party MEP and leader of Reform UK in Wales, has been sentenced to 10.5 years in jail after admitting taking bribes for pro-Russia interviews and speeches. At the Old Bailey, Judge Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb said Gill had abused his position and eroded public confidence in democracy. Chris, do you think that this so obviously he's been found guilty and now sentenced, but do you think that there are potential questions possibly that go beyond just him and that are for Nigel Farage and others in Reform to have to answer?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, we have to say that Nigel Farage would say that no, there isn't, there's no kind of wider implications. But of course, people are going to ask questions. So yes, this will not be obviously good for Reform, and it will just play into the attack line that Labour and the Lib Dems have been doing in terms of Farage's position on Russia and Ukraine.
It is a weakness for Farage, right, Matthew?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the problem Reform have got is a lot of these early candidates, and a lot of these candidates years ago. I mean, this guy was a member of European Parliament. That's many, many years ago when we were in the European Parliament. A lot of these candidates and individuals were not vetted to the standard that you would expect of a mainstream big political party. I mean, that's the problem Reform have had. A lot of their candidates at these May local elections, were not vetted to the standards that now Reform are vetting new people. It is one of those things where the standards have got to be improved every election. I mean, justice at the end of the day was served here. It will do a bit of damage, but Reform can just say, oh, look, he wasn't vetted to the same standard as we do now. What I would like to see, and this is putting all politics aside, I, as a Conservative, obviously would want a Conservative government. But if we can't have a Conservative government, I would much rather a Reform government than, frankly, any other coalition of any other parties. Reform have got to up the game. They have to up that vetting, the names, the people who are coming in. They have to up the standard to the point where this stops becoming a question. And if there are people in the past who weren't vetted to the same standards, if there are people in the past who probably won't get in if they were going through the process now, Reform need to find ways to slowly get rid of them. And I point towards James McMurdoch. James McMurdoch was not expected to be a member of Parliament. He was not expected to get through. Reform claim he was one of those where the vetting company that they paid to do the vetting failed on. What happened when James McMurdoch was suspended for the allegations against him? Reform said, you're not getting the whip back. And I actually think that was a choice. I think they chose to go, look, you were never supposed to be a candidate in the first place if this vetting had taken place properly. You ended up getting elected. Fantastic, well done, congratulations, not expected at all. But you shouldn't be here. So we're not going to restore the whip, even if you're vindicated and nothing's happened. And I think that's what Reform have to start doing, where they've got these councils full of councillors who should never have got onto the ballot in the first place. They have to start finding ways to clear out that wood and bring in a new set that are to the higher level. That's hard to do, but it's got to happen if Reform are going to get rid of these, questions of being unprofessional, a full party of interesting and dodgy sort of characters.
Well, folks, we've whizzed through the big debating topics of the week, and we didn't even get to the fact that yet another Your Party MP has quit the party before it's even a party. There you go. What more?
What a
more can you say?
disaster.
Matthew, tell us about your podcast.
Well, thank you very much. So it's called Matthew's Blueprint for Britain. I've set it up to have a bit of fun. It's very much like what you guys are doing, where I invite someone on and we go through 3 main stories of the week. I always make sure that they choose one of the stories, anything they want, whether it's, wasn't it freezing this morning, or did you see this in the news? It's a bit of fun. Tons of Union Jacks. That is mandatory. If you don't have a Union Jack, you're not allowed in the club. And it's, we're trying to find some hope and positivity in the darkness of politics at the moment. I just want to say as well, can we all appreciate how brilliant you were, Matthew, on LBC? You are absolutely fantastic. For those who don't know, which would be, everyone must know, Matthew was on Cross Questions with Ian Dale. Absolutely smashed it. I texted him the day after and said, I tell you what, you are the best out of that entire panel. So I really, really credit to you. I'm very jealous. I've never been invited on Cross Questions, but now I know what to do.
Well, you'd be great. And I have to say, even Dr. Chris was nice about me.
Yeah,
miracles happen.
I think it must be your weekly sparring partner. That must have you must have upped your game, Matthew, because of that.
Absolutely. And on about your podcast, Matthew, obviously you've had Dr. Chris on, and I think I'm right in saying that you've got my good self on next week.
I do indeed. Let me just check the diary when I've booked you in.
I think it's next Friday.
28th, and it's next week. You are next week's episode.
So that'll be good.
I hope you get your voice back fully for next week. Well, I want, punching full on.
I know. Yeah, that was the only.
Do you have a Union Jack? Actually, I was just going to ask this. Obviously, you want to go back into the European Union, so where's the Union Jack?
I'll come with my European flag next week.
I'll ban you immediately. You'll be banned from the podcast. The first to be banned.
Folks, do check out Matthew's podcast. I forced myself to watch his episode with Dr. Chris, and it both raised my hackles and made me smile in equal measure. So that was really good. But yeah, it's really worth a watch. Matthew, thanks very much. Really appreciate it. Great to see you. Chris, thank you. Now, folks, please do all the internet-y things. Please like, please follow, please subscribe. Please follow us on Twitter at @PollFrenemies. And I can announce today, because short of a problem happening between now and next week, this should be happening, that next week, right here on Political Frenemies, will be well-known right-wing personality and sometimes presenter on Talk, and now Reform councillor Russell Quirk will be right with us here on Political Frenemies next week. So fantastic. I think that will be an experience for both me and Dr. Chris. And no doubt for Russell as well, but we're really excited about that. I'll definitely need to get my voice back for that one. But from Matthew, from Chris and myself, it's goodbye, and we'll see you next week on Political Frenemies.